Good afternoon, Authenticate attendees. Please help me to welcome to the stage Andrew Shikiar, the Executive Director and CMO of the Fido Alliance.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to see so many people here. I'm very excited to welcome you all here in person, and those of you at home watching remotely, to Authenticate 2022. As you see here, we're very glad that you're here, and that we're very glad you're here remotely as well. Out of curiosity, how many of you in the room were here last year in Seattle? It's hard to see, so maybe around a third of us. Last year was our first physical Authenticate, and things were still pretty bumpy with COVID, but we still managed to have around 200 plus attendees and several hundred attending remotely. To me, the highlight from last year was the positive energy in the room, and there was a real sense of community. People were very excited to see people again, and I think it was the first time for many of people last year. It might be the first time for many of you this year. But there's also kind of a shared sense of purpose and almost a missionary zeal, if you will, last year about understanding that we need to work collectively to advance our collective cause and moving beyond passwords. So for me, this is a bit of a homecoming. I grew up in Seattle. I still love this city, even though I haven't lived here for a decade or three. And I came up early and had a chance to stay with my parents. And actually, I did some work for my childhood room. And like many of your childhood rooms, no longer are there posters or childhood knickknacks, and it's now the family office. But this is what I found in my parents' office. I'm sure we've seen this before, right? It's full of sticky notes with credentials. Funny, haha. And the fact of the matter is, if you know the name of my deceased dog, may she rest in peace, and some of their key dates, you could probably hack into many of their accounts. But the problem goes beyond that. I saw them all weekend struggle with passwords. They're locked out of accounts. They're forced to create new accounts because everything's gone digital. And it's really a challenge as digital transformation is actually leaving many people behind. And these pains go beyond my parents, of course. Think about people who might be visually challenged or mentally challenged, and you're asking them to do 2FA between screens and copy a code from one screen and discern between a 2 and a capital Z and then enter it on a keyboardless device. But that's a real problem. So digital transformation is a challenge. And I think we have an opportunity with authentication to be a bridge of the digital divide, not another wedge. That's something we should all think about as we move forward these couple days. If you attended the pre-conference FIDO workshop facilitated by my co-executive director, Christina Holka, earlier today, you learned a lot about how Fido Alliance works as a body. But ultimately, we do three things. First, we build technology. So we have use case-driven specifications and technical outputs that ultimately are submitted to formal standardization to formal standards bodies. Secondly, we've built a thriving B2B ecosystem. So we certified products to be conform to the specifications and also interoperate. There's a thriving B2B ecosystem of FIDO certified products and vendors. Then last but not least, we focus on facilitating adoption. And this is more and more of a focus for Fido Alliance and our members in helping all of you be successful with your own FIDO implementations. What's important to note here is that this truly is a cycle. It's a feedback loop. Continuous improvement is what we're aiming to do. It's not a direct line. And so to that end, it's been a year since many of us were here together last October for Authenticate. And needless to say, it's been a busy year at that. And all three fronts we just talked about. So it goes without saying, I believe that passkey was a headline build activity, if you will, for Fido Alliance in 2022. Now, passkeys themselves aren't net new technology per se, but they are a new way to implement WebAuthn that allows a private key to be securely synced across an OS cloud. It's very significant. We'll be talking more about passkey in this presentation and throughout the 3 days we have here together. On the ecosystem front, Fido Certified remains a flagship part of Fido Alliance with nearly 1,000 Fido Certified products in market, which is really a remarkable milestone for us to be hitting. But now we're building upon the proven competency of our certification programs to bring new offerings to market. This year we've done two things. The Fido Certified Professional program has gone live. So we're seeing the first people go through that program in its entirety. And then secondly, we've just launched last week the DocOS certification program. So vendors can now fairly assess RPs, can now fairly assess how well their vendors are performing remote identity verification tests. And then on driving adoption, it's also been a very busy year. Enterprise adoption of FIDO has really rapidly ratcheted up this year. And so we've released a very important asset to the community called the Enterprise Journey Map. This was done by our Enterprise Deployment Working Group. It's an asset on our website that allows implementation teams to check their own progress against this map. It's full of do's and don'ts and best practices and suggestions as you implement FIDO inside your own enterprise. And then usability. You can't talk about FIDO without talking about usability. Usability is absolutely critical to seeing FIDO deployed at scale. We've done two significant things this year. First, we launched a UX committee. This is a board committee of design and usability experts inside of Fido Alliance. I can't stress how unique this is in the standards world to have design and usability experts having purview over all things that we're doing inside of Fido Alliance. On Tuesday afternoon, we have a session where we'll introduce the Fido UX system, and you can talk to many of the people who are driving this effort. A second key UX thing we did was release our second compendium of the UX guidelines. This version focused on implementing FIDO security keys. But frankly, this pace of innovation isn't new. We do this year in, year out as a body, and we're actually coming up to 10 years now. So for 10 years, we've seen this pace of innovation inside of Fido Alliance as a benefit to the industry at large. Nearly 10 years, I should say. So we'll be celebrating next year officially. But what makes Fido so successful has been we haven't strayed from our mission, right? Our mission is to reduce industry's reliance on passwords and legacy multi-factor authentication. From day one, we've had this audacious goal of shifting away from centrally stored shared secrets to a model that is possession-based in nature and relies on common end-user devices. That's been our guiding principle, full stop. Now, granted, how we've been approaching this has changed and matured over time, but it is that guiding principle that's helped us successfully focus on the task at hand. So looking back briefly, there's been a lot of accomplishments over 10 years with some highlights. February of 2013, Fido Alliance was launched formally, open for business for new members to join. In February 2014, the first live implementation of Fido took place. Right, so Samsung, Knock Knock, and PayPal worked together to implement the ability to do biometric reauthentication on the Galaxy device. Around the same time as that, of course, Google and Yubico and others were working on the second factor standard that became U2F. And both those protocols were finalized in December of 2014. Moving forward, in May of 2015, we launched a FIDO Certified program, which I already talked about. Then in September of that year, very significantly, NTT Docomo became the first mobile operator to deploy FIDO at scale across many mobile handsets and devices. In February 2016, we formalized our partnership with W3C to form the Web Authentication Working Group inside of W3C, which begat WebAuthn, of course. Then that rolled into Fido 2. The Fido 2 standards were finalized in April of 2018. That following year, we started off by seeing Android and Windows become Fido certified platforms, if you will, meaning you could use the biometric capabilities on these devices to serve as a Fido authenticator. Between those two movements and all the WebAuthn work being standardized in different web browsers, we finally started to address the ubiquity challenge that Fido needed to address to reach deployment at scale. In January 2020, Apple joined Fido Alliance on the board, which sent a powerful message to the industry at large that Fido Alliance was the place to be to discuss how to standardize multi-factor authentication. October 2020, we had our first virtual Authenticate. April 21, our first IoT spec came out, Fido Device Onboard. 1.0 specs are final and public. Last June, we released our first UX guidelines. In March, we announced a vision for passkey, and then again, just last week, another milestone, releasing the DocAuth certification program. So that's a lot to cover here, and there's a lot more that's not in these two slides. But the fact of the matter is, we're making a difference. These efforts matter. This week, you'll hear case studies from companies that are deploying FIDO authentication to tens of thousands of employees or hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide. And I encourage you to attend these sessions. On Tuesday, Megan Shamus has a session where she'll share results from our second annual FIDO Authentication Barometer, which points to decreased password use worldwide. So progress is happening. Now, that being said, of course, work remains to be done. And one reason why that is that one thing that hasn't changed in 10 years is that hackers are going to hack, right? They won't sit still. They're entrepreneurs, or they're industrious. They'll find a way to hack into systems. And so over the 10 years, we've seen threats evolve, right? So we all know that credential phishing can be incredibly effective. So it's little wonder that phishing continues to grow in volume and sophistication. SIM swapping and smishing is also growing with great success as more people actually depend on this channel for 2FA notifications. Social engineering is incredibly effective as well. All these things are leading into a growth in MFA bypass attacks. Now, it's worth noting that at the beginning of the year, we actually predicted this would happen. So in January, during our annual cybersecurity policy forum, we made two predictions. One was that phishing attacks will continue to succeed. Now, granted, that's not the most ambitious prediction, but that was true. But secondly, we said that MFA bypass attacks will become mainstream. And unfortunately, that is true. That is accurate. And I think the big problem here, the fundamental problem, is that people don't understand the difference between legacy 2FA, legacy multi-factor authentication, and modern unphishable possession-based multi-factor authentication. And that's our mission, is to make people understand the difference, build the tools and products that allow them to implement a better way of doing MFA. Now, a great example of a highly sophisticated MFA bypass attack that happened recently, of course, was Octopus. Right? Octopus caused immense damage. It targeted dozens of companies, Okta customers, and nearly 10,000 login credentials were stolen. And as Rachel Toback points out here in this tweet, in reaction to this, a lot of companies are going to ask, well, hey, how can I prevent this? And the most straightforward answer is, hey, you got to implement FIDO security keys. Right? That's the way to go. And I think this was really a shot across the bow for a lot of companies. And hopefully more and more will implement FIDO. The other thing worth noting, though, in this tweet from Rachel, is that she highlights a Twitter blog post where Twitter talks about how they rolled out FIDO security keys at Twitter. Twitter was a victim of a very well profiled social engineering attack in 2020. And what they did is actually learn from that, and not only learn internally, but actually roll that information out externally. So we don't like seeing anyone get hacked, of course. It's not good for that to happen. But this level of transparency, this level of community and willingness to share is absolutely critical for all of us to do, sharing our successes and our failures to help us collectively progress beyond dependence on passwords. Now, there was one counterpoint to the Octopus attacks, and that was Cloudflare. And later today, we have a case study from Cloudflare on how they're using FIDO2. But Cloudflare has been a long user of FIDO2 both internally and in their B2B products, and they were not successfully attacked by Octopus. And this led to the Hall of Fame tweet response from Evilgenix, who simply shed a tear at Cloudflare's use of FIDO2. And Evilgenix, this is the open source phishing platform. So what we want to see in the future is more tears from Evilgenix and less high fives. So going back to our predictions at the beginning of the year, we also had some better, happier predictions. One is that enterprise password deployments would grow and grow rapidly. We are seeing that. And the other one we made was that mobile platforms will provide consumer-ready solutions at scale. So we may have had some inside scoop on that one, but of course that was manifested in passkey. So let's talk about passkey a bit. What is passkey? Right, so passkey is a noun. Passkeys are a password replacement that provide faster, easier, and more secure sign-ins to websites and apps across a user's devices. As announced by Fido Alliance in March, and with support from Apple, Google, and Microsoft in May, passkeys address some of the usability and deployability challenges that have held back widespread FIDO deployment by allowing the private key to be securely synced across an OS cloud, thereby allowing customers to simply use their local device unlock rather than having to re-enroll each device. So this has been supported by all three major platforms. Apple is now live in iOS and in beta with macOS Ventura. And just last week, Google announced their support in beta in Android and in Chrome. So we're seeing great progress here on passkey, and we're very excited to see this evolve over time and see more and more adoption. But it's a fair question to ask. Like, why would FIDO take this change? Why would we change a way that we've been authenticating users since our inception? It comes back to our mission and the singular focus we've had on this mission. Our mission is to reduce industry's reliance on passwords. Passkeys stand to take passwords out of play for hundreds of millions of consumers immediately, full stop. Right? So that's a very significant addition and is very consistent with our mission since day one. Now, it's also important to remember that passkeys are complemented by security keys, FIDO security keys, which can host single device passkeys and remain the gold standard from a security standpoint for FIDO multi-factor authentication. So again, FIDO security keys can support passkey as well. Now, also important to note, I didn't cover this in the last slide, our definition of passkey actually means any passwordless FIDO credential, right? So not just a sync type that we're talking about, but also pre-existing FIDO passwordless credentials. This is important because we have never had a consumer-ready term for FIDO. Or what do you call a FIDO authenticator? Somewhere Bill Leddy's in the audience laughing at this because we used to talk about this at length. But with the term passkey and a common mark, we now have a common term that service providers can point to and use to help educate users and start reinforcing positive behavior in moving passwordless with FIDO authentication. So Fido Alliance is happy to provide a number of industry resources for passkey. This is our website, fidoalliance.org/passkeys. That QR code will take you there. On that site, you'll find an FAQ. You'll find information about the logo, how and when you can use it, and more information over time. Also worth noting, we collaborate with the W3C WebAuthn community adoption group. From that group, they've launched the passkeys.dev developer site, which is launching today and will have more and more content over time. So that's passkeys.dev. If you want more info, track down Tim Capali or Nick Steele. So here we are, right? So passkeys are launched. What's next for Fido Alliance? Well, more of the same would be my point. We'll continue and focused on driving innovation, industry coalescence, and adoption around FIDO authentication. So passkeys are not an endpoint. If anything, it's just another beginning. We'll continue to iterate on this, right? So we'll build new technology. We need to establish an ecosystem. We need to see how the ecosystem reacts to passkey, right? We contemplate an ecosystem with future independent passkey providers in addition to the current platforms that are supporting passkey. We need to take steps to talk about how you can optimize usability for passkey deployments in a variety of settings, and all this feeds back into the Alliance, feeds back into our development process to continue to perfect this very promising new way of implementing FIDO authentication. And to that end, it's actually incredible that we've seen major companies that have been FIDO stakeholders since day one continue to iterate on their own implementations of FIDO, and looking at passkey in particular as a way to bring their customers forward into the future of passwordless authentication. So now, to that end, I'm actually happy to bring two special guests on stage to talk about their company's plans for passkey. So my first special guest is Marcio Mello. Marcio is the head of product for PayPal's identity platform. I also compare Marcio to Johnny Appleseed. So before Marcio was at PayPal, he did a FIDO implementation at Intuit, and before that at eBay, and before that he was actively involved in Intel Security's work on passkey as well. Excuse me, on FIDO as well. So Marcio, please.
Thank you, Andrew, for this opportunity, and congratulations to the Fido Alliance on its 10th anniversary. We all know here how important you have been for the success of the Alliance. For me, it feels like coming back home as well. My family and I moved to the Seattle area and stayed here for about 12 years during my tenure at Microsoft, when my passion for passwords and identity started. Our older daughter was just some little Microsoft kid on campus growing up, graduated from UW, and guess what? Last year, she started at Microsoft as a full-time employee. Proud dad, sorry. So this area will always hold a very special place in our family's heart. And now here I am, representing PayPal, a founding member of the Fido Alliance during such a special time in our industry. I would say this is an inflection point in our decade-long commitment as an industry to a passless digital world. At PayPal, we take our users' accounts, identities, and their data they trust us with very, very seriously. So it was only natural for us to be leading the way and an early adopter of passkeys. Not only for its built-in spoofing and phishing resistant capabilities, but also because of the operating system platform deep integration, such as Apple iOS 16, as well as Mac Ventura, and now with Google in beta and Microsoft coming soon. This provides that amazing combination that we've been waiting for of both convenience and security. Something that's absolutely required for us to be able to reach the scale, the large scale consumer deployment that we've been looking for worldwide. So with that, I would like to show you a quick sneak peek, special sneak peek into PayPal's adoption of passkeys, which will soon make available for a limited number of customers in the US. So Andrew, let me show you first how easy it is for a passkey to be created at PayPal. I will start with paypal.com on an Apple iPhone running iOS 16. Our PayPal customer goes to the standard login form, enters their username and password, and then after that successful login, we offer a simple trigger for them to create a passkey. The Apple system sheet shows up, they perform a quick Face ID to create the PayPal passkey, and boom, they're done. That easy, that fast. The private and public key pair have been created for PayPal. Now you may wonder, what happens when that user comes back to the paypal.com on the same device to log in? So here, the user will go through the same login process, but instead of having to type a lot of things, all they're gonna do is type login. We're gonna remember the username. You click on login with passkey. The Apple UI shows up to select the passkey. You continue. Done. You're logged in. One step, one tap. Nothing to type. Nothing to make a mistake and redo it. Nothing to remember or forget. Those are phenomenal improvements in any relying party KPIs when it comes to login success rate. But now that you saw how to log in on the same device, thanks to the iCloud keychain, the user now wants to log in to paypal.com on her Mac, the Mac running Ventura. And thanks to iCloud keychain, when the user goes through the login process and types the username, well, they don't even have to type the username because they're already going to be offered the passkey. So you just select the passkey, you tap on that, you do a fingerprint reader because that's the sensor on the Mac device, and boom, you're logged in. Once again, 0 characters to entry, nothing to type, nothing to forget. Just go to your device and enjoy PayPal. I'm holding back as a Brazilian because I want to be clapping and celebrating with you. But now you may ask, well, what about the devices that the user needs to use PayPal that don't yet support, or the browsers that don't support passkey just yet? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me show you. Basically, and I've done that myself. So you go to maybe your PC or a Mac or a Chromebook, and you click login, and you enter the identifier, the username. And we PayPal know that there is this account, there is a passkey available for that user. The user clicks next and sees that offer of use your phone to log in, and a QR code is offered. You take your iPhone with you, you scan that, sign in with the passkey on the iPhone, do a quick Face ID on the phone, and boom, on the device that originated the request, you are now logged in. What a beautiful thing. So that, once again, shows the power of how the platform supporting passkeys, in this case using the iPhone as the authenticator, to unlock access to PayPal using the PayPal passkey on a device that has not yet added support for passkeys. True cross-device, cross-platform from day one. In closing, I know the journey is still long. We're not done at all. But that feeling that I'm feeling right now, that we are all in this together as an industry, knowing that that pain with complexities of creating and managing passwords will soon go away, is too good to hold back. So Andrew, at PayPal, we're pumped up. I am very, very excited to celebrate this unique milestone towards our commitment as a company and as an industry to make passwords a thing of the past. So my sincere thanks to you once again. Thank you, El.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Marcio. So I hope you're kind of seeing a theme here. The slides I had with the circle, we're seeing things come full circle. So one of the founding first implementers, PayPal, talked about how they're now moving forward with passkeys. One of the other initial deployments that I highlighted was from NTT Docomo. So I'm now very honored to bring on stage Koichi Moriyama, who's a chief security architect at NTT Docomo, also a longtime board director and longtime chair of the Fido Japan Working Group, and recently has been named to the board of directors at W3C Inc. Moriyama-san.
very honored to be here. Thank you, Andrew, this opportunity. I met Fido in June 2014, and I thought, this is it. Fido is the future of authentication for protecting customers from attackers. And we just decided to go for it. Within 10 months, we deployed Fido for multiple services with multiple devices by multiple OEMs with Fido certification and with the first ID scanner equipped device, smartphone. And we actually deployed that. The pictures were presented by the Fido Alliance at the Fido and Docomo Media event on May 26, 2015. That's the history. We created the very first ecosystem deploying Fido from the beginning. Now this graphic illustrates a long journey to create a word without password since 2014. Now in phase one, we just focused on UX, just with the tagline, as you can see, your security more simple. That means in those days, the importance of anti-phishing MFA was not well recognized. So it was the best way to get started from the UX perspective. Then during phase two, in those days, unfortunately, we needed to customize Android OS. So then we really created a new architecture by utilizing the updated key store implementation, not to rely on the customizing Android OS. That is just the same as today's Android Fido 2 architecture. And then 2 years ago, here in Seattle, at the first Fido conference, Authenticate 2020, we demonstrated the account passwordless authentication, which is enabling an option to disable the account password for all services. We already got started that, eliminating password. Then today, it's my great pleasure to inform you that we will adapt passkey with deploying or WebAuthn. We'll do it for all platforms, starting from iOS and eventually Android as well as Windows Hello. And this will be really bringing much simpler and stronger authentication for numerous customers, more than 50 millions. We have already mandated some services by just Fido authentication from this summer. So we definitely will continue to work with Fido to create a real world without password. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, super. Thank you, Moriyama-san, for this very special announcement and your ongoing leadership inside of Fido Alliance. So with that, I'm going to start wrapping up here. A couple points to consider. The first one, deploy today. All right, there's no reason to wait. You just heard from two companies that have been working on Fido implementations for the better part of a decade. So deploy today with the Fido specs that you have, and you can always iterate and move and evolve those over time. There's a Fido protocol and a Fido approach to meet whatever use case you have. So whether you're trying to target hundreds of millions of consumers or a dozen network admins, you can deploy Fido today. Secondly, build upon our progress. The amount of brain power and IP reflected in Fido specs is remarkable. You basically have 10 years of inputs from some of the brightest minds on the planet, all readily available in our freely available Fido specifications or through Fido certified products from our B2B ecosystem. The third thing is to leverage Fido best practices. So again, we have lots of case studies these 3 days at Authenticate and even more on our website. This is a way to see what others have done and then learn from that. I encourage you again to tap into those resources. And then last but not least, get engaged, right? So this is a chance to engage as a community, but get engaged as a Fido member. If you're not a member, if you're interested, come talk to Christina or myself. look at FIDO Certified Professional Program and take part in that activity. There's different community groups out there focused on FIDO authentication, web authentication. I encourage you to get engaged in those groups. So that's the end of that piece of my presentation. Let's talk about what to expect over the next 3 days. Basically, 3 days of awesome content, a vibrant expo, and ample networking opportunities. We'll have 3 tracks running this year. Don't worry if you can't make a session. Everything will be available on demand. For those of you at home, also, everything will be made available on demand as soon as it's encoded and uploaded to the site. Most of our speakers will be on site. Some will be remote, but generally you'll have a chance to engage with the speakers either through Q&A or grabbing them after their presentations. On that note, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for taking the time to submit abstracts and then build presentations and work with our committee to perfect those presentations. Speaking of our program committee, special thanks to these 9 individuals. This is our program committee who's helped shape this entire program. That's taking a lot of time to pour through the presentations that our speakers submitted to make sure that all of you will receive optimal content during the 3 days of Authenticate. So thank you to all these people. Yay. It's really been an awesome group. Thanks to our sponsors. This might be my favorite slide simply because I can't see all those tiny logos. Our expo hall sold out, so thank you all for all of your support. For the attendees, please visit these companies. We really have a unique set of technologies on display in the expo hall and the foyer, so please take the time to visit them, and thanks also to all the supporting sponsors who've helped make Authenticate happen this week. Some housekeeping items, 2 things that you all have to do. First, visit the Attendee Hub. This is the digital event portal for those of you on site. This is where you can access your profile and manage your agenda and things like that. But also download the mobile app on site in particular. The Cvent Events app is what you have to download to build your schedule, but also we want you to ask questions through the event app. That way your questions will be intermingled with your remote attendees' questions, and we have session moderators who will work through those to ask the presenters. There's also Wi-Fi information if and as you need it, but definitely download the mobile app. Last but not least, Wednesday is our networking reception. It's the closing ceremony for Authenticate, also the opening welcome reception for a member plenary. It should be a great event. How many of you went last year to MoPop? All right, it's pretty cool last year. It's going to be better this year. All the exhibits are open. They have great exhibits. It's a really fun place to dig into the music history of Seattle, as well as various aspects of pop culture. Also, free food and drink, which is probably the most important thing. One thing to note, you're on your own for transportation, but take an Uber, take the monorail, take a taxi, get down there, and it's easy enough to get to. So it's a short ride. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time this afternoon, and I'm now thrilled to introduce our featured keynote, who is the director of CISA, Director Jen Easterly. Director Easterly could not be here in person, but she recorded her presentation. We also have CISA Senior Technical Advisor Bob Lord. Many of you accurately know him as the patron saint of FIDO. So Bob will be coming on stage after Jen's recorded presentation. So thank you. Let's go ahead and cue that up. Thank you.